All right, so this is, hopefully, this has been useful. This is, we kind of jumped over the place a little bit and we got out of Jeremiah. I was going to read more of Jeremiah 6, but then I realized that last night when I was putting it together, I don't want you to think I just wrote this all last night, but when I take the teaching, always on Friday night, I review it and I reread all the verses that I felt led to put, and I'm checking to make sure where I'm supposed to start and where I'm supposed to stop. And very often, I move one of those points, either the starting point or the ending point of the verses. Either I want to read more or less, depending. And in this case, when I got to the verse about it being instructed, that's when I realized I don't need to read as much of chapter 6, but I need to jump over to Deuteronomy 4. Okay, where we talks about this idea of being instructed, and we're going to see this play through because we're not there yet. It's all the way in verse 36 where he actually talks about being instructed. Okay, so we're going to get there, but this is the process, and you can see how everything in chapter 4, had they attended to it, they wouldn't have been doing what they were doing in Jeremiah's time. If they had listened to this, none of that would have happened. And so what do you want to take out of that? If you would listen to this, none of the stuff that might happen in your life would be happening either. That's the bad stuff, the thing that's unpleasant, the thing you don't want, the chastisement, the correction. All right, so this is a part of the teaching section that was a session that we call the Afterburn. So if you have questions or comments about the teaching, you're welcome to raise your hand. Specifically about what we've taught today would be best. If it's about the first two parts included, I may be able to answer those as well. If there's anything else that I kind of touched on that you really want to get into, I may refer you back to a teaching, or we can talk about it privately at another time. Bear in mind what I said about Yeshua and the Jesus thing. Go listen to Beware False Prophets before we have a discussion about it. I explained it very thoroughly there. If you still have issues or questions, come back and we can talk about that and more. All right, who wants to get us started?
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of stuff that came very close but didn't exactly quote Deuteronomy 13, so I thought it might be helpful for some of the people to actually hear what it says in the beginning. It says, "If there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder come to pass," not said to be a false thing, not said to be sleight of hand.
But it happened.
But it happened.
Right.
"Whereof he spake unto you, saying, Let us go after other gods which you have not known, and let us serve them. You shall not hearken unto the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your Elohim, proves you to know whether you love Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your soul." It's a direct test from him.
Amen. And that is where we start off with it. That's where we go in the Beware False Prophets teaching, is because it was that week's Torah portion that led to that teaching. Now, bear in mind, this is the key. The signs and wonders came true, yet the person was false. So bear in mind with that. Also, over the centuries, our enemy has gotten much more subtle. In other words, people say, well, but this wasn't leading me to other Elohim. No. The subtlety now is, instead of leading you to other Elohim, meaning with other names and other things, he's going to lead you to see him in a wrong way. So if that sign and wonder teaches you that he is something he's not, so he's connecting it up in verse 4. It says, "Walk after Yahweh your Elohim and fear him and guard his commands and obey his voice and serve him and cling him," etc. Okay? So the point is, if this other person's signs and wonders and whatever they were doing come true and lead you away from that verse 4, away from seeking after him, clinging to him, and doing what he said, then that one is a false and a problem. Okay? And you can't tell me that the Jesus mainstream Christian personification as applied to Messiah doesn't exactly do that. It absolutely does that. Okay? And that's where we run into so much challenges. Now, if you go listen to Beware False Prophets, I spend 90 minutes explaining that and showing from verse after verse after verse. So let that be in there. But if you have not embraced fully what that's all about, now someone's going to say, you're saying the Messiah is false. No, I'm saying the way he's been presented to you by the mainstream church is false. Just like when Israel pointed to the calf and said, that's Yahweh. Well, it's not Yahweh. Okay? And Messiah never would have stood for doing away with the law. Messiah would have never stood for Christmas and Easter. Messiah would have never stood for all the things that personification has been sold to you. You've been sold a false representation. So in that way, it's like a golden calf. It's not the truth. It looked good. The people liked it. It looked good. They loved it. Wasn't the truth. This is not easy stuff. I know some of you are sitting there like this now online going, well, you have to go listen to the teaching. Do you know that still in our videos, it's in our top 5 or 6 or 7 every week, even though I did it like 3 years ago. Actually, I did it originally in 2001. But the video that we have was done only a few years ago. And it has the most views, I think, of anything we've ever done. But it's important. It's probably the most important thing I've been given to teach people, is for them to understand that important message. And perhaps we'll redo it so that we can get Marty to redo it and put all kinds of nice graphics up on there and everything else. Would you guys like to hear that redone? Beware false prophets? I enjoy it, so, we'll see. All right, Shira, go ahead. It'll be more than 3 parts, probably. No, I'm kidding.
I really appreciate what you said, Rabbi, explaining about the path. Each of us has an individual path that,
yes.
Father, that we have. And it's been helpful to me in letting go of the things that were good on my path that brought me here, to think in terms of the fact that Yeshua said, the Father himself loves you. That sometimes in Christianity we've had this idea, well, Yeshua is the one we can relate to. The Father really doesn't like us very much until Yeshua gets through with us. He doesn't even want to. But Yeshua himself said, nobody comes to me unless the Father draws him. And I wondered what you think about where I've been at. I want your thoughts on it, because in looking back in my past and looking at the good things, I'm now seeing Father loved me the whole time. Even as he says in Isaiah, I think, he loves Ephraim and is going to turn him. Father loved me all that time, and it was Father's gracious drawing that brought the good things that were always there, that led me to the truth.
Right.
And so that was Father, but I thought I knew Yeshua really well. I thought it was Yeshua that I was relating to, but often it was another spirit. But the things that lasted, the things that I still look at as
came from the Father.
Grounding me, came from the Father's drawing.
Okay, that's very good. And the problem that we have is that when the things that we use the phrase, the good things, the problem is that when those things happen, those things can often make us feel like we were in the right place. Because after all, good things, whatever that means, everybody has their own understanding of what that means to them. But after all, good things happened. So therefore, that place I was in couldn't have been so bad. Well, that doesn't actually compute that way. Okay? When you're in the wrong place, you're in the wrong place. As a matter of fact, what makes it worse is when it's mostly right and it only has a little bit of bad. Now you really think you're in the right place and you're still in the wrong place. That's what makes it worse than, some of you came out of other belief systems. And it's much more easy for you to say, that was wrong. It's harder if the thing you came out of was almost like where we are, almost like the truth, to go, well, it was close. Well, this is not like, horseshoes or hand grenades. Close is not very good. Okay? All right? You got to be dead on or you're not on. He wants you to have a heart to want to be right in the center, in the bullseye, in the mark. Okay? That is the key. And so embrace the journey as being, that was my journey. I'm glad I went through it because it got me here. Don't embrace the journey as, I wish I was still there, or I embrace some of those things still as in terms of wanting to justify that somehow some of that stuff is still okay today. It was a journey you were on. It got you here. Now, anything that's not from this book, straight out Torah, the way Yahweh and Yeshua express it to us, that stuff needs to be let go. In terms of continuing to embrace them from that point of view. They had their use. They got you where you ended up. They had a purpose for you up to a point. It's hard, I know. I find a lot of people struggle when I teach certain things because they're still swimming upstream against their personal experiences, and they think I'm trying to mock, belittle, or not give enough credit to the experience. No, I embrace everything that you went through as being legitimate and real and helped you get to where you are now to whatever degree. There's no insulting or offense being sent that way, but it has to be, that's all it is. It was what it was to get you here. Now you need to go and move forward, and that's where we have to be focusing on. Hopefully that makes some sense. Okay, where's the mic? Okay, Kara?
I'm really fascinated and perplexed, too, about what you had to say about thoughts and stuff. I've heard you talk before about, how we have two sides of us. There's the side of us that's here now, I guess you say the good side or something. It's who you've become. It's as far as Abba's gotten you to be. But then there's also a totally opposite side of you that can take over if you allow it to. And I just don't know exactly how you control your thoughts because, especially if you're trying to, like you said, get rid of old thoughts, old thought processes, just stuff from your past or whatever it is, to fully be in the here and now instead of constantly being, controlled sort of by your past and kind of, I don't know how that works because, it's one thing to control what you do. It's like, okay, well, I'm obviously not going to do this or say that or act that way. But then it's another thing, thoughts just kind of, I don't know. They can just kind of come and go. You'll feel a certain way or whatever. How do you get control of that?
All right, so one of the really great things about thoughts is you can have one on purpose. You can place one as something that you can choose. Okay, this is what I want to make sure that I'm aware of and I'm thinking about. Now you've got to find a way to do it often as an episode becomes an emotional thing that now becomes a habit. So you can actually write down, people use affirmations. Okay, affirmations simply you writing down a thought that you want to embrace more often, and then you read it so that you remind yourself about that thought that you want to have. And then the more emotional you can get, the more you're going to have strength in that thought. And then when you have the thoughts that you don't want to hold on to, don't think about them as often. Take that thought, quickly get rid of it when it comes in. Take it into captivity, so to speak. Or if it's a thought that comes a lot, then you can choose to attach a different emotion to it. See, now when that thought comes to your head, you can decide that that's repulsive to you now. So now the more repulsive the thought is, the less you're going to want to hold on to it. The problem is not the thought. The problem is what we do as soon as it gets there. Do we hold on to it? Do we meditate on it? Do we think about it? So to speak, that's a phrase that I know is hard to say. We're thinking about a thought. But in other words, does it stay in our mind and dwell there for a while? That's the thinking about it. Or is it a fleeting thought? We all have fleeting thoughts. Okay? All of us have had fleeting thoughts. You're near the edge of a cliff. Hey, I wonder if I could jump off, It's a fleeting thought. And then we don't jump. Okay? We have these weird fleeting thoughts that pop in our head, and we get rid of them very quickly. Imagine the person, though, that actually jumps is a person who held on to that thought and dwells on that thought and meditates on that thought. The more you hold on to a thought, emotions get attached to it, eventually action. So you can now choose actively, write down the thoughts you'd like to have, write down the ones you don't want to have, and now change the emotions that are attached to those thoughts. And then read them to yourself every day. Read them a couple of times a day. Put them on an index card, pull them out, and then read these things that you want to be a part of you. I know people that have done this to quit smoking. They've written down, I don't smoke. They still smoke, and they go around telling everybody I don't smoke, and eventually, the more they focused on that and said it, eventually one day they went to pick up a cigarette, and their brain went, what are you doing? We don't smoke. I'm not kidding. That actually works. Even while you're sitting there with a cigarette in your hand and someone said, I thought you quit. Yeah, I quit. I don't smoke. At some point, your brain's going to say, I can't be a hypocrite. I have to have congruence. What I say and think has to manifest in the action that matches it. And so you can choose your thoughts by actually literally choosing thoughts and writing them down and deciding that those are thoughts you're going to embrace or meditate on. Meditate simply meaning hold it in your mind for a period of time. And the big thing to do, though, is attach the right emotions to it. If you think of something in Torah as being drudgery or boredom or some sort of non-pleasurable emotion, well, then you're not going to do that. That piece of Torah is never going to happen. But if you change it in the way you embrace that thought to, I look forward to it, it's a joy, it's something that's going to bring blessing, it's going to make my Father happy in the heavens, and then you change your emotions to the thought, then that thought is going to eventually manifest in action. Isn't that true? I mean, we really basically only do what we want to do. The stuff we don't want to do, somebody might force our hand and twist our arm. And even then, we're still only doing it because we want to, because not doing it is going to cause more problems than doing it, so we do it. Because really, nobody can force you to do anything. It's like the person that I was as a kid. I didn't like to write papers. I hated writing papers. Still do. My mother thinks it's funny that I have to write a sermon every week. I said, yeah, Mom, but that doesn't look like a paper, okay? That's just a list of verses. It's very different, all right? But to write if I had to write out this sermon, that would have been torture for me. So what did I do? I wrote all my papers at the very last second. Why? Because the pain or problem of not doing it finally outweighed the pain or problem of doing it. So that leveraged me. See, what you want to do is get leverage on yourself by emotionally connecting with the correct thoughts that you want to have and emotionally disconnecting or changing to a negative emotion the things you don't want to have. Because I promise you, there are things right now that if I went to you and asked you to do it, you'd be like, no way, not interested, not for me. Because you have such emotions connected. My wife, not a big fan of heights. If I said to her, hey, let's go do a ropes course that's up 50 feet in the air, okay, no problem, yours, go, you can enjoy it, not interested. Roller coaster, that's great, honey, I'll take pictures of you, I'm not going on it. Because she has this negative thought, whatever it is, emotionally bound, that she doesn't want to do that. We all have stuff that we don't do because that's the way we feel, right? What if you changed your feeling about the stuff you want to do that you shouldn't to that kind of a thought? What if you could change your feelings about the things that you want to do that you shouldn't do? Does that help? Okay. And I will let my wife have the microphone.
Okay, and speaking of that, I grew up a Sabbath keeper, and my sister was working with somebody who was a Pentecostal, and they invited us to go to their church on a Sunday and experience it. I had no idea what that was all about, but being that I had a different mindset and a different spirit in me, when I was in that church and they did the things that they did, and they said there were powerful things happening, I didn't see any of that as good. It wasn't good in my eyes. In their eyes, it was totally great. They felt like the Ruach was there. Because I had a different spirit and a different mindset, I did not perceive it as good. So I think it's perspective, too. I'm hoping that a lot of people that are coming into Torah who have experienced things in their churches might consider that if they went back there now, they might see it differently. They might see that that was not necessarily good. It was a spirit that came from somewhere else, and it wasn't of Yahweh, and hopefully they will not see that as good anymore. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Okay, so remember, everything is filtered through your perception. Your perception is filtered through your experience. Okay, so that's an accumulation of your experiences, helps you to receive and experience something in a certain way. And so then it goes and filters through, and so you think, wow, this is great. And another person will be like, I don't see it, I don't get it. Maybe they don't think it's awful, they just like, oh, I don't know, okay? And so that can happen. That can happen. Also, Yahweh, depending on, he did an amazing, to me, I thought it was an amazing miracle. I was at a conference that I had been invited to observe because the people that were thinking of having me become their rabbi in their congregation wanted me to get a sense of kind of some of the people that were the influencers of their journey. And so there was one of those influencers having a conference, so I was invited to this, and they paid for me to go and to come and just watch. And it was very charismatic, which I'm not against the charismatics, but I'm saying it was a very charismatic group. And at one point, they all had sung a bunch of songs about the Shekhinah, or the Shekinah glory, as they would say, and they all went up to the front of the room, and I don't know what normally happened when they did this. Is something they did every year. I'm assuming everybody just fell out in whatever they would do. But the 3 or 4 of us that didn't go up to the room, who were with me, that were invited to watch this, and that's when I said to them, if anything happens, let's run. They all stood in the front of the room, and we're just watching, and nothing happened. They all looked really confused, and nothing happened. I kept thinking at some point someone's just going to start it. Whatever was supposed to happen, someone was just going to force it. And even that didn't happen. They all went and sat down, and someone said, there must be a restraining spirit in the room. Sorry. And so I thought that was a miracle because they didn't even force it, which I would have figured somebody would have tried to spark it or whatever, because literally everybody but 5 of us or 4 of us didn't go up to the front, And so I don't know what Abba was doing there. I certainly was praying, Abba, I don't know what's happening here, but I trust in you. And so, but now bear in mind also, they allowed for shofar blowing anytime, all the time during this conference. And I'd been blowing mine pretty good. And in my opinion, a shofar in a Baal Tekiyah, a master of the shofar, clears a room of all that nonsense. And so I'd been blowing it pretty good, so maybe that had an effect. I have no idea. But that to me was a miracle. In other words, whatever would normally have happened didn't. That's a sign too. Sometimes a sign, now that was a sign not for anybody else necessarily, but for us. Like, oh, okay, whatever was going to happen here. Now, I was almost disappointed. I wanted to see the show. I was really curious what it is they were all waiting for. Because I didn't know. They didn't say, we're all going to speak in tongues or we're going to all roll in the... I didn't know what it was. They all huddled together, and something was going to happen. Nobody ever told me what it was later, so I have no idea what it was. But whatever it was didn't happen. They were all frustrated and felt like, what, did we do something wrong? Or is somebody mad at us? Because whatever was supposed to happen didn't happen. And I'm just sitting there going, I don't know. I really didn't pray against it per se. I was just whatever you have in mind. I actually wanted to see what happened as long as it was over there and I was kind of at a safe distance, But that was a sign. That was a sign and a wonder too. But, let's understand, look, we do not want to mock, we do not want to ridicule where people come from. That was their journey. Some of those journeys took them through wherever. It doesn't matter. You can fill in the blank. Every possible background you can imagine, not only Christian, but any other background, people have come out of. And so that was their journey. And so our tendency, though, is to mock other people's journeys that weren't your journey. Well, I can't understand but they're not going to understand yours either. They didn't go through your journey. So if you were Baptist or Pentecostal or Catholic or Adventist or Lutheran or any of the other 32,000 denominations, or if you were Wiccan or if you were atheist or if you were Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim or I don't know, the other million religions I'm not aware of at the moment, or Jewish or Catholic, whatever, it doesn't matter. It was your journey. So please, if I've said anything, I don't mean to say anything that would ridicule or mock what was going on in your life. What I want you to do, though, is to let it go. Take what was useful out of it, which was that it got you here. That was the useful part. Let the rest of it go. Become a clean slate. Let him write on you new stuff. Now, if some of that new stuff matches up with some of the stuff you learned, because there was truth wherever you were, or you wouldn't have been there. If there was no truth there wouldn't have been anything to attract you there. There's always that little kind of like a divining rod in your body, in your system, that leads you to some truth. And then when there's not enough of it, you go somewhere else looking for more of it. So there must have been some truth there. In everything, even in the witchcraft, there was some truth. Wherever it was, there was some truth. You were there because there was truth. A little bit or a lot. By the way, it doesn't matter. How much poison do I need to put in your drink to kill you? Not probably a whole lot. Okay? So just a little bit is enough to kill you. And that's why we are constantly vigilant, guarding ourselves. Guard yourself. Examine yourself. Oh, we're so good at examining everybody else. Okay, but let's not mock. This is going to be coming up in a couple of months. I told you this before Christmas. I'm going to tell you this before Easter. Don't post mocking, attacking Easter things. If they're embracing it, they don't have the eyes or the ears, and they've not been drawn. It's not their fault. Don't you mock them. Then you're not looking Yeshua-like. Okay? You show me one place in Scripture where Yeshua is mocking the Gentiles. Oh, he's giving it pretty good to the guys who are in the my people category, because they should know better, but not the outsiders. He's not giving it to them at all. And so let's do the same, right? Let's imitate our Messiah. Let's respect it. That's everybody's journey. Everybody had their path. My path wasn't yours. Yours wasn't mine. However, we all know that we've talked to people and you can hear sometimes their old path coming out. You can hear it. You can hear the whatever, fill in the blank, whatever their background is. And that's because there's some part of their background they still are holding on to. We need to cleanse that out. Okay, anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
What Robertson said triggered a memory. When I was growing up in the Episcopal Church when I was young, I was where my parents, for generations, my family had been Episcopalian. There was a kind of, it was strange. There was a kind of bubble around me. I loved Yahweh. I sang in the choir. But I held things that they said kind of, dismissed it. And as I grew and became a teenager and a young woman, it became very obvious that my heart was hungering for something more that wasn't there.
Right.
So I set out on a journey. That was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And as I traveled, journeying through other bodies of people who professed to be believers, the same wall, the same bubble was still there. And I held it with a critical eye, looking at it, and couldn't accept it until he showed me Torah.
Amen.
And then, even then, some of the things that were being taught of with the label of Torah on them, I couldn't get them either. So when we started to listen to your teachings, things started popping and dots connecting, and things that Yahweh had been showing me and not allowing me to take in all started connecting. And just praise Abba.
Amen. Actually, you know what? Give the microphone back to Tricia. I'm going to ask you specific things that you can share. Okay, so sometimes I think we need, and we don't have the experience, because not all of us came through a background of so much spirit world stuff, okay? But I want you to hear from someone who was there that it's real, and blessings come out of it, and all of the things that we think is coming from Abba come out of it, and it's not him. So go ahead and just share just a little bit that from your experience that's, I mean, I just said it, but you can just, okay, I'm just looking for someone to say, look, I was there, it is real, and the other side can give you what looks like good stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
I was very much in there. The power is very real. The experiences are very real. I had people witness the expression, like you said, that if Hasatan stood right in front of us, we would think it was God, and I did. He was there. The voice is very real. The power, the manifestation.
But it all looked like him, meaning the creator, not the enemy.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But with all that, it was very empty and very dead, and the fruit was death and destructive. And repenting of it and coming into Torah and allowing the Creator to be who He is what brought a sound mind,
Yeah.
and healing and deliverance and stability.
Right.
And that there is greater power in reality than the false reality.
False. Okay, but I want you to hear that, though. The false reality, which still was a reality, still was able to answer prayer, provide you with things, supply your needs, all the things that you believe and know that Yahweh would provide. Because remember, Hasatan is the false imitation of the truth. He wants you to think of him as the creator. Okay, he wants you to look at him, and so it's an imitation that's very, very, very real and very, very close to the truth enough that it could fool even the elect, it says, if possible, could be fooled. So I don't want you to think that only those kinds of things can come from the right side. They can come from the other side as well. Don't forget, Pharaoh's magicians performed the first couple of plagues. They duplicated. It doesn't say they were using magic like sleight of hand. They did what Moses did, is what it says. I know we see in the movies it looks like they're doing goofy tricks. No. The scripture says they did exactly the same thing. All right? So they did the same thing. So there's a lot of power in that world. And that world tries to convince you it's the kingdom when it's not. It's a different kingdom. Okay, and that's important. And you may need to find somebody, and we have several in that we've come throughout our ministry, who live in different areas and stuff, who lived in some of these places and understand that world. And that world is very real, but it also often tries to present itself like it's the right world. It's not like in another pagan religion thing. It's in something called Christianity, and it presents itself as if it's the real in that package, because of the imitation and the false representation there to try to convince you something is, it's not. That's like pointing to the golden calf and saying, this is Yahweh. Okay? Zarek.
Yeah, just kind of on the same note, I was actually just talking to Dewey about experience I had when I first started on my little wayward walk in life. Was got invited to a healing service by a girl, and I just went because I thought she was hot. But went there.
As long as you're going to be open and honest, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I just went because I was like, well, she's cute. I'll go, whatever. So went with them, and this was in Oklahoma where I was in basic and AIT. So I had a hurt shoulder, and they came for time for the healing. She's like, go up there. I'm like, whatever. So I go up there, and the guy next to me had a huge cut in his shoulder that I got to see get healed. And they came up to me and went to do this prayer and thunked me on the head, and I'm looking at him. He went to go do it, and granted, I had the blessing of my dad's always been in ministry, so I knew I got lucky to know the difference, but I'm sitting here looking at the guy, and I'm like, if you hit me in the head again, there's going to be a healing. It's not mine, but so just some of the fun stuff that you can see outside of that world that I got lucky enough to get to see some of it without getting snagged in, because I already knew, okay.
But now you saw
fake.
the guy's cut heel?
Yeah, actually physically saw the guy, because he had to pull his shirt back because you show what's hurting, and so you see this gash in his arm that he had just gotten earlier in the day.
And you saw
the guy
it heal.
prayed for him and got thunked on the head, and it just gone. I'm like, well, that's creepy. And then I got thunked on the head, and I'm like, you hit me in the head again. It's gonna be on.
No, but I want you to hear this. These things are real, and they strengthen faith and belief in that whatever system it is that you're seeing it in. Wherever you are when that happens, it strengthens your belief. That's what Deuteronomy 13 is talking about. Thank you, Dewey, for bringing that up. But that's why, well, people would have got that brought up anyway when they went to the Beware False Prophets. No, but you had brought up that these, Deuteronomy 13, the strengthening of the faith, leads you when the false prophet or false teacher or whatever says something and it happens and it comes true. See, it's easy to know they're false when they say it doesn't come true. What do you do when it does come true? That's harder to know what to do. And so, it would pretty much blow my brain a little bit to watch a cut heal in front of me. If the guy's got a big gash and the guy's being prayed over and the thing just seals up, and I'd be pretty messed up about thinking, oh, wow, these guys are some power here. Now, you don't know if it's a good power or a bad power, but there's power. And so that's what Paul tries to tell us when he says, look, you're battling against principalities and powers, etc. There is power out there, and not all of it's Yahweh's. Except his is the biggest, the best, and strongest, and most powerful. So we have no fear of the other powers. But just remember, the most dangerous of the outside powers are the ones that try to convince you they are him when they're not. That's the danger. Where's the mic? Okay, Daweed?
Sorry for double dipping, but just wanted to add one thing to the kind of thing he just said. I was raised generally partially Pentecostal, Baptist-costal, charismatic kind of thing. And of course, they have the tongues thing going on. And I was filled with the Spirit at one point, and I was speaking in another tongue, and somebody basically identified that as being Aramaic. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Later on, I learned more about Semitic languages, including Hebrew and Aramaic, because you meet them in the Siddur. And a lot of the sounds that were in the words that were in the Aramaic were what I was saying. So that was confirmed, but then again, going back to Deuteronomy 13, a sign or wonder come to pass doesn't matter whether it comes to pass or not. If
It matters where it's leading.
Yes.
Okay.
Not only that, but there's another test outside of the fact that what is going on with them is whether they're teaching Torah or not. There's also another test. The fruit of the Ruach HaKodesh is multifaceted. And if you're missing one key ingredient to that list of 9, you don't have the fruit. You might have all 8 of the others, but if you don't have that last one, you don't really have the fruit. And I know for my own self, one of the ones I was missing and still working in was self-control or self-discipline. And that was a key thing that made me aware that if I actually had the Ruach, I would have had the fruit to show it. And I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Christine?
So, once upon a time, I was, I guess, in a charismatic movement, Pentecostal, I don't know what you want to call it. But I thought I wanted to speak in tongues. And the ladies I was around, who, of course, wanted to do the praying over you and such, they were explaining that I needed to basically surrender myself, my thoughts, whatever, to this spirit, which was supposed to be God. And then I would be able to speak this tongues. But even in the heat of that moment, I could not logically put all this together because I didn't know the spirit they were talking about. And so I never was able to receive that tongues, and thankfully so. But for me, things have to connect logically, and that didn't. And so I'm glad I wasn't able to get that.
Okay, and again, look, there are people that do and people that don't, and we don't want to get too involved in getting where we're going to judge that whole tongues thing. I'll be doing a teaching on that hopefully at some point here. I know Rabbi Tom already did. But the thing is this, just realize that wherever you came from, and the charismatics have this challenge more than most of the different denominations, wherever you came from, the more emotional the place was, the harder it is to let go of some of the things that were done. Okay, and there are other belief systems that get very emotional too. But, I think we could all agree that generally among the Christian denominations, the charismatics are more emotional in the way that they do the things that they do. And it's that emotional part that makes it harder for them to let some of the stuff go that they learned there because of the emotional content. So I don't know how emotional I know some of the other religions get very emotional too. And so the more emotional, remember the thought when attached with emotion then leads to action, habits, etc. So the less emotional the place was, the more easily you will be able to let go of it. The more emotional, the more. And that doesn't mean that emotional means you had to be all effusive. I know some groups that the strong emotion was, we are the one true church. Now, they weren't emotional like yelling, screaming, and singing and dancing, but that was a strong emotional thought. There was a pride, ego, emotion. And so I know people in one or two of those places that will never leave because, after all, they've been indoctrinated. This is the one true, that's it, you can't leave. There's no other possible expression of this. Okay, we go right back to the apostles. Really? Do you have a chart that shows that? Okay? And really, even if you did, so what? All right? But the thing is, it's how emotional. Now, again, emotional doesn't mean necessarily the whole disposition of that movement. Okay, charismatics are more emotional generally in the way they're more effusive in how they, but there are some groups that are very emotional about, meaning they strongly feel certain ideas. Some of the once saved, always saved guys, some of the dispensation guys, and you can find that in the Baptists just as much as in the charismatic, that strong emotional thing. So realize the more strongly they feel about something, the more difficult it will be to let go of that something. And that can come from the Adventists. Look, the Adventists got so much right, but they got so much still they don't have, but they've got an emotional bound to, a lot of it has to do with them thinking they're smarter than everybody and they know everything better than everybody. And that's my personal experience because I deal with a lot of you guys because we're in Adventist land here with a college on 5 miles from here. But that's an emotional connection, okay? Anywhere you're emotionally connected, that can be good, that can be bad. Just depends on what you're connecting to. The more strong the emotion, if it's something you need to let go of, it's going to be really hard to do. Does that make sense now to everybody? Is there any denominations and other things I haven't picked on yet? I want to pick on everybody equally, okay? But just realize look, we have this huge problem in the Hebrew roots and the, let's call it the Hebrew roots, I guess, the Messianic Jewish, Messianic Israelite, movement. Because a lot of these people, they came out of their churches, they came out of wherever they came out of, and now they think they know everything after they've been in it for 5 minutes. And they get all emotional. That, again, it's that feeling strongly about. All right? And then they become almost impossible to share anything with because they're emotionally bound and locked up. And so this is really where it's a thinking, it's a heart-head problem, right? And here I am, I'm going to start being Catholic again, right? I'm going to start tapping my head and my heart. I'm not going to touch my shoulders. No. Okay. Anyway, this issue is about the hardest thing we got to deal with. Because it's really hard for us to deal with what's going on in our head and how our emotions get involved in it. And it's the emotional thing. That's when a person will say to me things like, I'm listening to what you're saying, Rabbi, but I can't wrap my brain around it. Because there's an emotional blockage. Not an intellectual blockage almost every time. It's an emotional blockage. Because what I'm telling them, or what the book is telling them, is somehow going upstream against some thought that's emotionally connected strongly. And letting that go is really tough. It's really tough, which is why I said to, many times, going through whatever background all of you went through, unless you went through nothing, whatever background you went through, especially if it was Christian, that's like the hardest way to get here. Because you have so much that was so close that a lot of it was right, that emotionally you're all bound up because you're all excited about that. And basically every system of belief teaches you to get emotional about your Savior and about your King and about your Creator. And so when you connect all of those things to them, that's really tough. Taking somebody from nothing to this, that's a lot easier. They got nothing to let go of. They just have to embrace something. Unlearning is 500 million times harder than learning. There's no doubt about it. To let something go, why? Because we're so emotionally connected to it. All right, anything else real quick?
I went the other way. I was raised in a Baptist church, and the emotions there that I had there didn't feel right to me. And I kept questioning, like, why do bad things always happen? If there's a God and this and that. And it took me the opposite way of becoming an atheist. So whatever was there was like feeding on my thoughts and everything. And it really messed me up for a long time. Mm-hmm. And just wanted to say that it can take you further into that, or it can take you away where you just don't believe anything. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But just bear in mind, again, I keep hitting this because I think it's important. It's easier when you come to belief to realize that the atheist thing was wrong than to come out of something that was mostly the same as where you are now and let go of the things that weren't exactly right, because it's so close that it should work and it should make sense and you're emotionally connected in that way. Okay? That's the tough part. Is because you didn't come, most of you came out of a Christian system, so that means that you didn't come out of something that had nothing in it. It had a lot of truth. You learned that there was a creator. You learned that there was a Messiah. You learned all kinds of really correct things. And so that makes it tougher than coming from a place where this is completely different than believing in nothing. Atheist. So, okay, I believe that there is no God. I believe that. So this is completely different than that. Okay, if you came from something completely different, it's easier in some ways than coming from something so close. I'll give you an example. When I was studying martial arts years ago, I went to go visit a school that was so almost the same as the style I was doing that I knew I couldn't go there because it was going to drive me crazy, because I was not going to be able to change my brain the subtle little differences. So I had a choice. If I wanted it bad enough, I would have done it. Or I could go somewhere else that's looking for ear tickling, so to speak, Okay, because I held my hand here and they wanted to hold their hand here, or vice versa, or they had a foot there and a 2 inches difference. It was all just slightly different. And I just said to myself, do I want to make the effort? Because that was going to be hard. I was so well indoctrinated to do something a certain way, and now I had to do it just a little different. And so that's the bigger struggle. Hey, you worshiped on Sunday, but you worshiped. You came, we got together, now you're worshiping on Saturday. And it's, that, at the beginning, that could be tough because, after all, what's the big difference? Okay? Eating different, that was a big difference. You had to then embrace that you're actually supposed to eat different because you had to let go of that emotional thought that, hey, I can do what I want. But doing things that are almost the same, that's tough. That's where you say, well, what's the big difference? Well, it can be. Huge difference. It can be a huge difference. All right, where's the mic? Okay, Sherry?
Yes. I went with a friend, this is before I was Messianic, but I went with a friend to see someone that was well known in the Christian community. And when I went there was a lot of believers there at that time, and this person was known for doing miracles. And it was interesting because during that whole night, my friend was like right on, oh yeah. And I'm watching and I'm seeing how when people came up and he would get money, how he would check in his hand in such a way to see how much he got. And I would see all these little things that he was doing. And yet my friend was right up there with me, never saw a thing. Well, when it came time to pray, there were a lot of people who stood up and she was one of them. And she got a gold filling. She said it had not been there, and other people had claimed it had not been there. And when she came back to the congregation we were at that time, she shared how she had gotten this gold filling. So I was trying to figure out in my mind, how can this happen? And I came to the conclusion that, well, there were people that believed in God. And so maybe because there was people that really were praying to God, maybe in their sincere belief system of who he was, that he granted this miracle, but it was not because of where they were. So my question was kind of like, okay, was that a miracle definitely of Satan? Or can God do miracles like that because of the belief of people, even though they don't know the God of Yeshua, but they believe in the God, the Godhead, the Father, as one. I'm just asking you.
Right. Well, this is what we've been trying to kind of unravel. See how tough this is? See, here I would think I've already unraveled this, right? But it's hard for people to always, and I'm not picking on Sherry, it's just hard for some people to really, because it's a tough thing. The important thing here is, again, there's only one purpose to signs and wonders: to strengthen belief. Now, I don't believe that Yahweh is doing those signs and wonders in these places. However, he may be allowing someone to be healed because he wants them to be healed for future things that may be going on, okay? Or he may just allow it to happen because he's totally hands-off at that point. Okay, he may just not, do you know he's not as involved as everybody wants to think he is in every little second of every little detail of every little thing? Oh, he's aware of it all, but he's not guiding and leading and pushing every little button. He's allowing hands off for the most part in a lot of things, which is why our lives are not as wonderful as we'd like them to be. He's very much allowing us to show and demonstrate to ourselves that our way doesn't really bring good fruit as a world, as human beings around the whole world. But what's really important out of what Sherry said, and I want to say something, can we please stop using this phrase, believers? You have no idea what people believe. Stop calling them believers. What does that mean? They're in a room full of other Christians. They believe what? Oh, well, they were believers. What does that mean? What do they believe? Sunday, Christmas, Easter, eating whatever? What does that mean? I'm not picking on, it's not a useful term. I would rather use the phrase covenanted if I know they're covenanted. If I know they've put them in the water and they've said the 8 declarations and they've actually declared they're going to covenant. And even then, that doesn't mean they're actually covenanted. It means they said they would be. So when people come and say, well, I know there's so-and-so and he's a believer or she's a believer. Well, what does that mean? I'm sure they believe in something. See, but that's a term you learned where? In Christian church. And it's Christianese because it doesn't mean anything. You have no idea what that, by the way, you don't know what anybody in this room believes really, unless you know them really intimately and they've talked and you've experienced and you know them. We don't know what people believe. Well, they're a believer. I have no idea what to do with that when people tell me that. I'm like, okay, that's great, whatever that means. I don't know. Well, you know, I met this person at work and he's a believer. Well, that didn't help me any. What does that mean? Believes what? What does he believe? I don't know. Am I making any sense here? We have to stop using these terms that don't actually say, as a matter of fact, they could mislead. Well, you know, so-and-so is a believer. Because they confess what? That there's a God and they believe in Jesus? Or does that make them a believer? 1 John says if they don't keep the commandments, then they don't really know the Messiah. So what do they believe? They're learning about things. They know enough to know there's a God and a Son. Okay, good. That's important. That doesn't necessarily make him a believer, whatever that is. I don't even know. It's not a phrase I ever use. Okay, but then again, I didn't go through mainstream Christianity where they use that phrase. Okay, so-and-so is a believer. I don't know what that means. All right? If they're all hanging out at a Benny Hinn concert or some other thing like that, Joyce Meyer, whatever it is, what do they believe? What did that tell you about their belief? Do they believe in Torah? No. Are they following Yeshua? No. Are they really following the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? No. They think they are. See, just because they think they are doesn't mean they are. That's what John says. If you think you are, but you're not actually obeying the commandments, you're not. You've been lied to and embraced the lie and thought it was truth because nobody ever opened your eyes yet to tell you the difference. And by the way, that's not your job. It's his job. Okay? So let's start cleaning up our vocabulary even to, say, I wouldn't use that phrase anymore, that person's a believer. The wheat and the tares are growing up together, even inside the body. You don't know who believes what. You don't. No matter what they say, you don't. Live with them long enough and watch them, you might have an idea. That's what James says, right? He says, if you watch me, you'll see by my actions what I believe. But unless you're that close to somebody, you don't know what they believe. So why would you call them a believer? Anyway, now that I've popped all kinds of bubbles and created all kinds of a firestorm where people want to send me 5 million emails, my email is Robert's going to get mad at me. We're going to have them all send all the emails to Robert. Okay.
They're not waiting. They already asked.
They already asked for the email?
No, they already asked their questions.
Okay. All right, what do you got there?
All right, first from Early. Do I get it? Do I let go of my thinking for my adult children to come to Torah, or me wanting to be a father to them in Torah?
No. Okay. Your part in all this is to want everybody you know to be in, to pray for everybody you know to be in, to have Abba open their eyes, their ears, and their hearts. But it's not your job to try to be the one opening their eyes and their ears and their hearts. Is that clear enough? Your part is to pray for them, to beseech the king and say, I would love my children to see what I see and know what I know. But it's not you to go over and try to sit there with the book and take your children and go, here it is, why can't you see it? Well, because they don't have eyes to see and ears to hear and everything else. They can't see it. You know, because you've tried. I'm not making this up. All of you have tried. And all you did was get frustrated and cause a fight. But yes, Earl, pray for them. Be ready. This is your role. Your role is when it happens, you be ready to help them through the process when they start asking and seeking and knocking. You set the example so that then when they start having that peace disturbed, they were like, wait, I know Dad knows this stuff. Let me go ask Dad. He knows something about this stuff. If you're not living it and they don't know you're doing it, then they'll never come to you. They'll go somewhere else. So you live it. You make sure they know you're living it. And be ready for them. Study so that you can share. Remember the 4 things the teachings are supposed to do, right? You're supposed to understand it so you can do it, so you can defend it, so you can teach it. If you haven't listened to the teaching enough times to do all 4 things, go back and re-listen to the teachings again and again and again. But you should, after you're all done, be able to understand it well enough to do it, whatever it is being taught, so that you can then defend it and then you can teach it. By teach it, I don't necessarily mean like this with a microphone. I mean even one-on-one with your children or your friends or other family members or coworkers or whatever. All right, what else you got?
This is from Johnny, and I think she's actually seeking clarification. She says, when you think and imagine the emotion and the fruit it brings, then you know if it's the right or wrong way. We are not to listen to the heart first, but we are to attach right emotions.
Yes. Is that from Denmark? Oh, see, we got people in Denmark on there now. We got people from all over the world. Johnny, yes, you hit the nail on the head. If we could control our thoughts a little bit better and choose our thoughts proactively, and then choose to attach the emotions we want to those thoughts. Even random thoughts, you can then say, okay, that random thought that popped up, I'm going to choose the emotion that goes to that. I'm going to choose if I want a good emotion or a bad emotion so that I'll either want to or not want to act upon that thought. Okay? Because when you're ready, I know people, for example, I use cigarettes as a good example because I know a lot of people that struggle with it and have quit. And I can tell you that almost everybody that quit, you know what they did? They quit. They didn't do patches and this and that and 5 other things. They just got to the point where they didn't want to smoke anymore. The desire finally got crushed enough where their desire to not smoke was greater than their desire to smoke. And they just quit. You'll never quit something trying to quit. You're trying to quit because you're not ready, so you're trying. So that's where your head wants to and your heart doesn't. When you want something or don't want something, everything else will follow in the direction of what you want or don't want. And so when you actually want it, see, the problem when you try is because you really don't want it. You're trying, but you don't want it. You're trying to quit, but you really don't want to quit. That's why you try to quit. You tell people, well, I'm trying to quit. Stop trying, quit. By the way, that's with all of your bad habits. Stop trying, quit. How do you quit? Stop wanting it more than you don't want it. Start attaching stronger, I don't want this emotions than the I really like that emotions. You have a choice. You can do this anytime you want. Go ahead, what else you got?
From Mary Navarrete, please, could she get some clarification on why Moshe wasn't permitted to cross the Jordan and how that pertains or is applicable to our walk today?
Tune into the Torah study when we get to Deuteronomy, or when we get to a place where Yahweh tells him not to. I don't have time to get into that now. He was basically told, do something. He got angry, let his emotions get carried away, and did what he wanted instead. And because he didn't have the discipline, Yahweh said, well, then you don't get to go in. Now, by the way, then Moses tried to beg him to let him in, and Yahweh told him, I'll have no more of that discussion. And he said that he was enraged with me for your sake, meaning Yahweh was mad at Moses for asking, because after all, if Yahweh changed his mind on something that he said was a judgment, then that puts all judgment at risk. And so you needed to know that when he makes a judgment, that's a judgment. There's no changing his judgment. So once he told Moses, you don't go in, you don't go in. Just like he told the people, now don't go into the land, you go and wander, and they went to go in anyway, and he killed them all. He said, oh no, I made a judgment. I don't change my judgments. And so Moses didn't get to go in because it was his judgment. All right, next. We'll try to get into that more detail when we get to the right Torah portions for that.
Okay, from Sam Castro. He says, with this growth, we shouldn't solely be seeking counsel for this, but also in our personal prayer, be open to what the Ruach is showing us, in addition to the counsel to help us be able to hear the Ruach.
Okay, I think I followed that. But, just understand that, and I've been talking about this for like the last, a couple of years, just really hitting it hard. You must find yourself a guide. You got to find yourself a disciple or a teacher so that you can have the question answered, which is, this was what I was thinking, and this is what I was feeling. Is it correct? But you can't just get that from anybody. You have to go vet and find what Abba will lead you to. Those guys in Ephesians chapter 4, right? The fivefold guys. Find that, and by the way, it could be one person wearing all the hats. But find that person. Find those people. Okay, when you find that person or those people, you have someone to turn to and say, this is what I was thinking or feeling. Help me understand if it's correct. And then that person should take you to this book and help you see from this book how that matches up or not. Okay? And so, yes, you do want to pray for the Ruach to open you up, etc. But you know what? Don't trust, don't take this wrong now. Don't trust the spirit that you're hearing from. It might not be the Ruach. That's another problem in Christianity. Christians assume every spirit that talks to them is the Ruach. They do. They think, well, the Spirit led me. The Spirit told me this. The Spirit. Which one? They don't believe that more than one can talk to them once they believe in Jesus. Then only the truth is speaking to them. But that's just not true. There are 3 at least. And 2 of them are not him. And each one of them wants to make believe it's him. You do that too. Your own voice tries to convince you that Yahweh wants you to do whatever it is you want to do, and that you're right to do what it is you want to do. And so that voice, that's your voice, tries to convince you that. That's where you say things like, well, I'm sure Yahweh's okay with this, or I know Yahweh knows my heart. That's you convincing you and wanting others to believe that it's true too. Because if it really was Yahweh, you would never have to say that. You would know. Okay, so yes, be careful when we say that we seek the Spirit. Yes, you will get an answer. Just make sure that you have some way to validate which spirit is the one talking to you. Because we're also told to what? Test the spirits. Okay? And so please don't just trust something that came in a spirit-led way, where you felt something or you were inspired to something or you heard a voice or whatever it was. That doesn't in itself give you enough information. Because I can promise you, and Sam can tell you too, because he came from a world like that too, and so did Trish and others, that is absolutely possible and often happens in the other realm as well. So you can't just jump to that, oh, well, the Spirit told me. Which one? Do you know? Did you test? Did you prove? How do you do that? Get counsel. Robert, go ahead.
From Richard Rapier. Christianity is built on recruitment, getting people saved. Are we to live our lives working out our salvation and avoid selling what we have been drawn to?
Yes. There's no reason to go out and sell anything. You're excited about what you know, and you may have an opportunity to share that with somebody who might actually be interested. Most people, if you start to share, they're not going to be interested. So once you discern that, and please be openly aware to pay attention whether or not they actually are not interested. Because a lot of you have no idea when you're talking to people about anything that the person you're talking to is completely not interested in what you're talking about. And so let's heighten our awareness of the other person's reaction to what we're saying. But no, he's actively choosing and calling who he wants, and the numbers and the variety and the places where he chooses when he chooses, period. We need to be ready to help those people when they're drawn to us. Okay? Be prepared to give an answer, not so much go knock on doors trying to convince anybody of anything. We're not in the recruiting game, and nor is there a contest, Yahweh versus Satan, and Yahweh looks like he's losing. Because that's what I hear when I turn on Sunday TV, and I hear them saying, we need to go out there and save everybody, because it's almost like a pep talk at halftime at a game, and it's Yahweh versus Satan, and there he's down 3 touchdowns. I think, what are you kidding me? Yahweh's not losing, nor will he lose. But isn't that how it sounds? And by the way, if he was depending on us, it's over. Game over. Okay? He is not counting on you and me to go out there and do all of this. I mean, I've heard people tell me they've had friends that almost committed suicide, maybe even some that did, because they felt like people were going straight to hell because they didn't do a good enough job of running out to save everybody. Well, look at how much pressure could you actually deal with that? Could you imagine that really was your responsibility? Wow, what a responsibility that would be. That pressure is not on you. Your pressure on you is to be a light, to take his walk and walk it and be a light so people see it. That's your job. That's your responsibility. And then be prepared to explain to people why you do what you do or don't do what you don't do. Robert?
From Lisa Webster. When the Father says, even the elect will be fooled, how do we guard ourselves so we are not fooled?
Okay, so he doesn't say the elect will be fooled. He says that the one coming will be so convincing that if possible, even the elect could be fooled. But the elect arms themselves with the right information. And then attaches the right emotions. That's why the beware false prophets teaching is so important. Because that teaching was meant to be given to the elect, so the elect would know when this happens, don't be fooled. That's what I felt the Ruach gave me to do with that teaching, was to share something so that now that you know, you're not as likely to be fooled. Okay, that's the responsibility of teachers. Your responsibility is to find those teachers and listen to the teachings, compare it to the Word, and then embrace what you need to have so that you have a good measuring stick. Look, Deuteronomy 13, which Dawid went to, it says, you see somebody do something and it comes true. Now look at where it's leading. Is it endorsing and strengthening your belief in Yahweh and Torah, or is it leading in the other direction? That warning, if embraced, will protect you from some things. Will have you rightly embrace or rightly know what to do with what you see out there. Is it something that I should touch or not touch? Be involved in or not be involved in? Go ahead.
Okay, William R. refined his question. He said that was a question when you were talking about getting the plank out of your own eye first, that may be a good caption for a ministry.
Oh, your eye ministry? Yeah, work on your own eye with a big picture of a guy with a plank coming out of his eye? It'd be kind of gross, but it'd be effective.
From Holly. She had experienced a false conversion to Baptist Christianity. Should she actually be mikvahed into the faith of which she now is?
I think that's a great idea. I would never tell anybody whatever they didn't take, didn't work, wasn't effective. You know, if you've been baptized, some of you have been baptized 3, 4, 5 times. Hey, you've got wet a lot of times. I would never question whether or not any of those were effective. I would say it couldn't hurt. In other words, there's nothing that would be bad for you to do it again. As a matter of fact, it would be totally appropriate because you are appropriate to mikvah, to go in the water, every time you have a status change. And guess what? When you learn a certain amount of new stuff and you purge out a certain amount of old stuff, that may be every year for your first couple of years. It wouldn't hurt to go back in the water. Now, you don't have to make any declarations or anything. You're just going for your own purposes back in the water. And when we do the mikvah for people to make their declarations, others are doing it just because I need to go back in the water. I've had enough new stuff go on and enough stuff that I want to bury that I feel like I've changed my status a little bit more. And so, yes, if you're now in Torah observant belief and you never were before, I think it would be totally appropriate for you to go in the water. Plus, if you've never done it in the name of Yeshua, but you did it in Jesus, you may want to do it in the name of Yeshua. I mean, there's things that you may want to do because you would feel like it would be more congruent to where you are. But bear in mind, I absolutely would never question that whatever you did before was invalid. I would never say that anything you did before was invalid. That's between you and him. I don't know. It's above my pay grade. What I can tell you is it wouldn't hurt anything to do it again. Okay? It hurts nothing. So I think it's a good idea.
All right, from Lance. Jeremiah 6:16 refers to the good way. Similar to that in Deuteronomy 6:7, walk by the way. Is there any correlation to Paul talking about the way in Acts 24:14?
When he refers to the people of the way?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing, okay? The word in Hebrew is holech or halacha or halach, and it means to walk. And so we often refer to the way to walk as halacha, okay, which in Hebrew really means that it means the way to walk, okay? And so Paul was referring to that as a Jew. He would have understood halacha very well. And he's saying these are the people of halacha. These are people who are walking the instructions. They know the way to walk. What I love is that all the Christian ministries that call themselves the way. But they're not keeping any Torah. You just kind of wonder how that works. Well, I should say they're not keeping any. I mean, they don't want people to murder, commit adultery, and some of those other things. So that's all real well and good. But I'm just saying is, they're not a Torah-based, they're not really a halachic-based group. But they call themselves the way. Well, because they know that the Messiah is the way. See, but if we know the Messiah is the Torah, then you understand why he's the way. He says, I am the truth, I am the life, I'm the way, right? I'm the truth, the life. Okay, so we know what truth is. We know he's truth, we know Torah's truth. We know what the way is. The Torah is the way, and he's the way. It's all the same thing. We also know that Torah brings life, he brings life. He's the physical, living manifestation of the word, of the Torah. All right, go ahead. What else you got? By the way, the afterburn was designed to go through the entire time that would have onegged, since we're not onegging. I'm kidding. It's already 5 o'clock. I didn't say anything that controversial. I don't understand why we're going so long.
All right, I'm going to read 2 of these. I'm going to read 2 of these together because they kind of go together, and I think it's a shorter answer than the last one that I'll read, which is coming from Crystal said, is there actually a list of 9 specific things that you were talking about? And Chuck said, ask if you had said that if you don't possess all 9 fruit of the Spirit, do you not have the Ruach?
Okay, I didn't say any of that. Dawid did.
Well, actually, yes, I'm sorry. He did say Dawid said this, and I think that's where Crystal's word is coming from, because that's the only thing I remember being 9 things.
Okay, so there are 9 things listed in Galatians 5:22-23, okay, as aspects of the fruit. Okay, the thing is that there's one fruit, and these are aspects of the fruit, okay? There's not 9 different fruits, okay? But this is the fruit of the Ruach. And I don't necessarily agree with Dawid that if you don't have one, then that means you don't have the Ruach or whatever. But it means basically, as the Ruach is working with you, it takes the Ruach to live those 9 things on a level that the flesh can't do. So what I'm saying is, love, joy, peace, patience are your first few. Well, love is something we all can do without the Ruach. Loving our enemy is not. You see what I'm saying? So there's a Ruach level of these 9 things. You need the Ruach to do these things. And so when you start to do these things, it demonstrates that you have embraced the Ruach on some level. So you don't need to have all 9 of them to prove anything. If you could even love your enemies, you have embraced the Ruach on some level. Okay? If you can have joy, which is the second one, love, joy, peace, right? So joy in your trials, like James says in chapter 1, if you can have joy in a trial, that's a Ruach level joy. That's not something you can do of yourself. Okay, so look at the 9 things and say, well, yeah, I can have all those 9 things. Look, when life is great, you can have all those 9 things without any problem. Okay, you have love, joy, peace. Hey, listen, as long as everything's going great, I've got peace, patience, not a problem, kindness, gentleness. But let the stuff hit the fan. Now do you have all these things? It takes the Ruach. And that's you then you choose not to have it because you should have it, but to submit to it. The Ruach is there. You have to choose, am I going to submit to it so that I can be loving an enemy, joyful in a trial, peace when there's all chaos is breaking out around you. Does that make sense? Okay. What else you got, Robert? We got to end this sometime. Because we're all hungry and we still have to pack up and go to Manny's.
Yeah, this is one from Travis. So the name they wrote down in Greek was really the golden calf. Why would God allow that in his word? He would like a scripture reference to answer, please. And on the name Jesus being the same as the golden calf, and any found scripture with the name that you're using, because they all say Jesus in the Greek.
Okay.
That spurred a lot of conversation. That's the only.
Okay, let me answer this. Okay, I didn't expect to stir this up necessarily. Well, I guess I did. All right, so first of all, the golden calf is a Rabbi Steve Berkson analogy. It doesn't say that anywhere in Scripture, okay? It was part of me trying to answer a question on the ladies' Marco Polo prayer group and trying to make an analogy so they could understand what I was trying to say. So I pulled that analogy out because it seemed like it made sense to me. There are no verses that say that. That's number one. Number two, the New Testament was not written in Greek originally. Nor does it say Jesus. There was no J till the 1300s. So it says Iosus in Greek. So no, Yahweh did not. By the way, if you want to say, well, if it says, Iosus, why would God allow that? Why would Yahweh allow that? Well, why would he allow the King James to put Easter in the book of Acts? Okay, when it says Pascha in the Greek, but in the English, why does he allow the NIV to insert things that it does? Why does he allow? Because he's expecting us to work a little bit. There's a lot of messed up stuff in the Old Testament, which is in the Hebrew originally. And some of that stuff is messed up in the way people have translated it and put it into English. He's allowed us because he wants us to work, all right? I can promise you, if you understand that this is only a few hundred years, not even, about 175 years or so from the Maccabees, that no Jew was naming their kid with a Greek name if they were in a strong Torah-believing, proper place. Because what caused the problem with the Maccabees was Hellenization. In other words, the Greekifying of things, embracing Greek ways, Greek philosophies, Greek lifestyles. They call that Hellenization. And the original problem with the Maccabees was the Jews who were embracing that lifestyle were being attacked by the Maccabee-type people, Jews. So it was Jew against Jew first, not Jew against Greek. The Jew against Greek came later. It started out Jew against Jew. And so that issue led them to a place where I can be just very confident that people were not embracing naming their... It'd be like saying a Jew, even today, calling their son Hitler or Adolf. Okay, not happening. Why? It's too connected to something too recent that was not a memory you want to connect to. Okay? And so I don't believe that when Yeshua was out playing and Miriam yelled for him that she was yelling Jesus or Yosus. Now, let's go to something else that I mentioned, and people struggle with this. Yes, there is, because somebody this is another thing that popped up, and I can answer this also for the ladies, hopefully from Marco Polo who are on here. Okay, yes, the oldest places that you find Messiah mentioned in the Jewish documents is like in the Talmud, you find not Yeshua, but Yeshu. And Yeshu is a slur, and it's not the same as saying Yeshua. And so he's referred to because they don't like what this Messiah was used for by Christians to murder, kill, and vilify them as being Christ killers, quote unquote. And so, yes, in the Talmud, he's referred to as Yeshu. But if you look at the Hebrew word, Yeshua means deliverance or salvation. That's what the Hebrew word actually means. You see this in lots of the Siddur prayers. You see this in all over the Tanakh and the Hebrew. What you are also going to see is if you go to the oldest available, older than the Greek, which is called the Peshitta, which is the Aramaic, which is being held by the Greek Orthodox. They have the ancient documents in the headquartered places for the Greek Orthodox Church. Because remember, there was a split of the Catholic Church with the Greek Orthodox. Okay, and when that split was, they have the documents, and the oldest documents is in a document called the Peshitta, which is the Aramaic, and in that, it refers to him as Yeshua. Okay? And so that's older than the Greek we have. Okay, so hopefully that would make more clarity for that. So Yeshua is what it says in the oldest documents we can find. All right, so hopefully that makes some sense. But then the translation was made into what was the main language of the time? Greek. Why is everything now in English? Because the main language of the time now is English. Okay, that's mostly the universal language of the world, is people need to learn English because that's the language of commerce. It's a language of getting things done. Well, guess what? Back then it was Greek. And so everybody spoke Greek as part of what they did. They wrote things in Greek. That was the language. And so they translated it into Greek. But if you read the phraseology that you see Paul using and Yeshua using in the different places where the writings are, you will find idiomatic phrases that are clearly coming out of Hebrew Aramaic. They don't make any sense in Greek. They only make sense if they're in Aramaic and in Hebrew. There's a word play where the words all have the same first letter in Hebrew, and there's all kinds of cool other games that are going on literarily that you miss in the Greek, but you put it back into the Hebrew, and you get all of this cool stuff. So hopefully that answers that question in a long-winded way. All right? Next question. That's it. All right, let's get the children. All right, here we go. 1, 2,